The bounty and beauty of the river brought them here. Ancient wanderers, gatherers, hunters, and planters. Sometimes you can hear their echo along the estuaries. Soft footsteps, the chant of a shaman, heavier boots. The rattle of swords, the complaint of cordage raising sails, the slap of gunfire. Wanderers for a season they came, then were gone again. And the river was as it had ever been, unchanged, pristine, eternal. No one knows for sure when the trouble came. It was so very slow in coming. Settlers cleared the trees to build houses and to plant and to carve out a life along the river. After all, it was a beautiful place, a paradise. After the Civil War, tourists came. Many stayed. The city grew. Soon there were 12 hotels, a packing house, 5 lumber mills, 2 brickyards, and 14 cigar factories. Schooners crowded the wharf, loading turpentine, cotton, and oranges. It was possible we could have known then what was coming, what was happening as we cleared the pines and saw those first dark plumes rising from the factories and mills, when we began to see the stains slipping from the creeks into the river. But we did not. Nature was so vast, its bounty so abundant, what harm could come from a bit of smoke or stain? The years swept by like pages turning. The city burned, 2,000 buildings up in smoke, 10,000 people left homeless. The city was rebuilt, even greater than before. Dramatic recovery, remarkable growth. The population rose from 28,000 in 1900 to 57,000 by 1910. The city's skirts spread out over the land. Ships from all nations came for lumber and naval stores and the products of the new factories of the new age. By 1950, the population of Jacksonville had topped 200,000, with another 100,000 living outside the city limits in the county. In 1960, Jacksonville boasted nearly 500,000 residents. The city on the Cowford had become a modern metropolis. But something terrible had happened. The New York Times reported it first in 1949. Something in the Jacksonville air was disintegrating the nylon in women's stockings. Researchers at the University of Florida confirmed it was sulfur dioxide emissions. It was a warning, but nothing was done. Then, in 1961, there was a massive die-off of vegetation near downtown. Again, air pollution was cited as the cause. It was a rude awakening. People in the city began to look around, and what they saw was sobering. They saw a city with a natural environment as polluted as any in the nation. The air was foul and dark with particulates. The river was dying, the estuaries poisoned. The port was filled with chemicals. The earth was overburdened by the city's garbage and waste. The incidence of lung cancer was among the highest in the country. Something had to be done. In the 1960s, there was an environmental awakening. The emergence of grassroots activism forced political action. In 1969, the Duval County Air Improvement Authority was established. In 1970, the first Earth Day was celebrated. The people had decided to fight back against the polluters. The lawmakers listened, and the Federal Clean Air Act was passed. The next year, in 1971, the Environmental Protection Board was established in Jacksonville. The battle for the environment had been joined. The battle was waged on primarily 3 fronts: the air, from which we draw the very breath of life; the river, tributaries, and estuaries where sea life originates and dwells to provide a source of food; and the land, the soil, the earth, provider of food and the foundation of our human community. The first step in cleansing the air was to understand how the pollution was generated. It wasn't difficult to see how air pollution was released into the air by a wide range of sources such as fertilizer plants, paper mills, concrete, asphalt, and electrical generating plants. The situation was worsened by a unique combination of factors. The area's prevailing easterly winds brought the pollution from the industries along the river right downtown and into our neighborhoods, into the very heart of our existence. In spring and fall, the area is subject to thermal inversion, at times blanketing the city in dangerous emissions of sulfur dioxide, particulates, and ozone. At times, odors became unbearable. For years, Jacksonville was known as the city with the bad smell. 2 pulp mills and 2 chemical plants contributed significantly to the problem. Ironically, the 2 chemical plants that produced the odors used a foul-smelling waste product from the paper mills to create flavor and fragrance enhancers for cosmetics and hygiene products. Lumber, a primary industry in Jacksonville's development before the Civil War, continued to influence its growth. The prolific lumber mills, with their surplus of pine, bark, and wood chips, created a ready supply of raw materials for the pulp and paper industries. One craft paper mill began operation near the downtown area in 1939. Another soon followed on the north shore of the St. Johns, on one of the final bends of the river before emptying into the Atlantic. In 1985, the Environmental Protection Board adopted a rule to reduce sulfur emissions from craft pulp mills. 2 mills, the Alton Packaging Corporation and the Jacksonville Craft Paper Company, were in massive non-compliance to the standards. A task force of representatives from local chemical companies and staff from regulatory agencies began meeting in 1987 to establish control standards. WJXT TV4 produced a documentary, The Smell of Money, helping to bring our odor and other environmental problems into public awareness. As an indication of the seriousness of the offense, the City Ordinance Code was amended in 1988 to increase penalties from a maximum of $500 to $10,000 per day for most environmental offenses. Efforts culminated in 1991 with passage of a best management practices rule aimed at curtailing odors. Austeel Packaging, in litigation for 10 years, was ordered to pay a $3.25 million fine for violation of air pollution laws, the largest penalty awarded in an air pollution enforcement case in Florida. In 1992, one of the paper mills moved to total recycling, virtually eliminating its odor source. Improvements in control equipment and process operations have greatly reduced odors from these and other industrial sources. Aggressive regulatory action by the Environmental Protection Board, as well as self-regulation by local industry, have helped ensure airborne pollutants meet standards. There have been victories for air quality, but there is still much to be done. Most of the airborne pollution that remains is from gasoline-powered automobiles. In recent years, this problem has been confronted by requiring emissions testing at the time of vehicle registration. But the problem will never be completely solved until either vehicle use is reduced or alternative, non-polluting fuels are used. Toward this end, the city is experimenting with an electrically powered truck. This vehicle attains speeds of 65 miles per hour and has a range of 75 miles. The city is now operating a variety of alternative fuel vehicles. The implications for public use for alternative fueled vehicles on Jacksonville's streets are profound. The Transportation Authority is extending its people mover system to reduce traffic in the downtown area. The JTA is also experimenting with alternative fuels for city buses. These fuels are expected to significantly reduce diesel emissions. For decades, the pollution of the St. Johns was a slow and invisible process. Here was one of the world's most beautiful rivers, flowing through a natural wonderland as wide as the mind. As the city grew, as small communities developed in the county, hundreds of small sewage treatment plants were built. Unregulated, often in ill repair, they discharged marginally treated sewage directly into the St. Johns and its tributaries. But what harm could such a small amount of sewage be? The St. Johns was a mighty river, and it was a tidal river. Surely the tides would flush the sewage out to sea. The river and its creeks were ideal sites for industry. Chemical plants, paper mills, shipyards. Plants could ship their products on the river to world markets. And what better way to get rid of their industrial waste than pump it into the St. Johns? Fishermen were the first to notice something was terribly wrong. Something had to be done. The city responded by building modern, efficient regional systems like the Buckman Sewage Treatment Plant. The small package plants were either phased out, upgraded, or required to connect to the regional system. More diligent standards were applied. The consolidation of the city and county governments was a major victory for the environment. Now, instead of dozens of governmental entities making decisions and regulations, everything could be coordinated by one administration. So positive was Mayor Hans Tanzler that consolidation had cleaned up the river that he went skiing in the water that had long been considered too polluted for swimming. Pollution of the St. Johns was slowed but not halted. In the late 70s, fishermen were disturbed to find more and more diseased fish with open sores. The St. Johns as a food source was in jeopardy. Fish exhibited open sores caused by lead, PCBs, and other contaminants. In 1988, a massive fish kill was reported in the Broward River. The kill was estimated between 500,000 and 1 million fish, including menhaden, croaker, and mullet. Concern mounted for the marine habitats in our precious estuaries. Great steps to clean up the river were made when sewage treatment was regionalized and people began to comply with regulations. But with time, another source of pollution was recognized. As Jacksonville grew, more and more concrete, asphalt, and other foreign materials were laid upon the earth. Roads, parking lots, shopping malls, schoolyards, and lots of industry. These recharge areas where rain and storm water had naturally seeped into the earth were sealed. Now, when it rains, storm water carrying pesticides, herbicides, hydrocarbons, and other pollutants flows directly into the river. Storm water is the source of 80% of the heavy metals that poison the river. The more people, the more development, the more agriculture and industry, the greater the problem. A problem complicating the cleanup of Jacksonville's water resources was the preponderance of septic tanks. During the 60s, when many of Jacksonville's suburbs were being developed, the easiest and least expensive way to deal with residential waste was to construct a septic tank. But those septic tanks, designed to last only 30 years, are now beginning to fail. The result is a release of a bacteria called fecal coliform, a bacteria that causes illness in humans and has caused the closure of shellfish areas in the St. Johns River and its tributaries. The city is currently spearheading the development of a regional stormwater treatment system for the entire metropolitan area. The goal is to catch polluted runoff, remove the pollutants, then release the treated water into the river. But the stormwater problem still plagues the city to this day. While the city struggled to improve the quality of its air and water, more and more pressure has been placed on the third element of the environmental trinity, the land. Over the years, the city of Jacksonville has produced millions of tons of solid waste. There is a saying in the environmental community that everything has to go somewhere. For Jacksonville, that somewhere is one of its city landfills. In 1984, 2 of the city's 4 landfills were closed. There was simply no more room for the 3,000 tons of waste Jacksonville produced each day. By 1987, the situation was in major crisis. The landfills were full. Illegal dumping was rampant. Then, in 1992, the Trail Ridge landfill was open. Trail Ridge is a modern, high-tech facility composed of separate cells with special liners that prevent leaching of contaminants into the soil and groundwater. It embraces the landfill technology of the future. At old landfills, like the Girvan Road facility, technologies have been developed that make it possible to recover valuable resources that have been buried for years. Naturally occurring gas methane is now being recovered to be burned for electrical power generation. In an effort to reduce the amount of solid waste, the city has initiated a major recycling campaign featuring the most advanced technologies available. This nationally recognized recycling program, in combination with the city yard waste collection and other commercial recycling efforts, has decreased landfill use by nearly 40%. It has been named the best urban recycling program in North America by the National Recycling Coalition. The city and its environment have shared a long and stormy passage. Many communities have been as destructive to their environment, but few have sought to correct their errors with such vigor and intelligence. When confronted with the problem of massive amounts of water use, Anheuser-Busch devised a water reuse solution. Water needed in processing is now reused for their sod farm, as well as in the plant itself. The St. Johns River Power Park tests coal for sulfur content before it reaches the boiler, and specially designed scrubbers remove sulfur from the boiler exhaust gas. The power park attacked their solid waste problem by establishing a byproduct industry for their ash and gypsum. Now, a metropolitan city with more than 1 million people, it is more important than ever to attend to our environmental heritage. The pressures on our natural systems are enormous. While the successes of our community and local industries are many, it is the individual who must accept responsibility for the welfare of our environment. In the end, the health of the environment and the health of the city and its surrounding communities depends on the decisions that individuals make. If the air, water, and soil are to be free of poisons and contaminants, each man, woman, and child must embrace a lifestyle to greatly reduce and potentially eliminate those poisons and contaminants. We must consume less, drive less, waste less, and become educated regarding the impact of our individual decisions. We must actively participate in and support community efforts by working together, and we must care more about this natural world. It is easy to blame the troubles of the environment on the government, large institutions, and industry, but our problems often have more to do with what we as individuals do and do not do in our daily lives. There are some 70,000 different chemicals manufactured in the United States, most of them for products used in the home. Each of us must monitor what we use, how we use it, and ultimately how we dispose of it. The amount of packaging has increased 200 times since 1960, virtually all of it inessential, and most of it harmful to the environment. Styrofoam, for example, a great packaging material, does not break down. It is non-biodegradable. And 500 years from now will still be here in much the same form it is now. It is estimated that Americans use enough styrofoam cups every year to circle the Earth 436 times. How important is it to keep that cup of coffee warm a few more minutes? There is an effort now in our town to create more sensitive values about the Earth among the young. At facilities like E. Dale Joyner Nature Preserve at Pelotes Island, the Tree Hill Nature Center, and Theodore Roosevelt National Park, the young are allowed to rediscover the natural world. These are the inheritors of the Earth. Ultimately, its fate will be in their hands and hearts and minds. High on the left shoulder of Florida, where the St. Johns River coils toward the sea, there is an uncommon community called Jacksonville. The city is poised now at the threshold of greatness. The environment shaped the city. The city, in turn, shaped the environment. Now, as we approach the millennium, we have an opportunity to be what we wish to be. But our progress will ultimately depend on the decisions we make in regard to the environment. If we have the will, the imagination, and the sensitivity, the Jacksonville Passage can take us wherever we wish to go.
If you would like to become involved locally, or for more information, you may contact the City of Jacksonville Environmental Protection Board, 630-3420, the Audubon Society, 733-0550, the Sierra Club, 398-9482, Earth Day Jacksonville Incorporated, 630-3420. The Environmental Education Resource Council, 287-1763. The Environmental Roundtable of Northeast Florida, 630-3420. Duval Environmental Educators Network, 630-3554. Keep Jacksonville Beautiful, 632-4732. The Recycling Hotline, 387-8999. Jack's Pride, 398-4646. And Greenscape, 724-5518.